what you said earlier that kind of I want to poke at a little more is because you've mentioned how, you had a step in your life where you did a ton of things that was a big part of your identity, more related to tech. And now in hindsight, you look at it and you're like, oh, that was a little bit more of a side quest than my main journey. I'm a gamer too, so please, we will use those terms.
Yes.
And I find for a lot of people, when it comes to learning things like sales, like majority of people listening here are not salespeople, but there seems to be a minimum side quest we feel we need to learn about sales to be able to do anything in this world. And so I almost feel like, how do you balance enough of the side quests for the intention of supporting your main mission, as opposed to getting lost on the side quest and forgetting what your even purpose is?
That's a great question, because I just mentioned, like, I was on a 10-year long side quest. Some of our entire lifetimes could possibly be the side quest. And I've written little notes to myself saying the side quest is the whole purpose for the journey. So it depends on really what the goal is, where you're going. I think personally, it's almost like what I describe as my side quest did merge into and ultimately led back to exactly where I needed to be. Now, was it longer, or it's hard to say, because I don't even know if I hold space for the idea that time, how do you really measure that, right? In the grand scheme of your own development or progress in those type of, metaphysical or spiritual goals, or just simply personal development goals, which is something that is important, at least to me. And so I wouldn't put so much pressure on that balance. There are times I think things can be more cyclical, and what I've noticed with people often allow a misalignment to go too far, and then there needs to be some sort of existential crisis or massive change in a life, and that is like a change of career, or a romantic split up or divorce, or something might catalyze that, right? There's an external force that forces that change upon you, and then you end up forced on a side quest because you have to change everything. So I think if you could do more of that in day-to-day life, that's at least what I recommend to people, and follow, personal passions or learning new things, while also being open to the fact that that little new thing that you learn might become the whole thing. It might become the main path, and you didn't know it was just a stepping stone. It was just something that you glanced at off the path you thought you were on, and now you've completely diverted. And instead of seeing it as a diversion, maybe it's, because we tend to get a little too focused on the goals in kind of modern Western, with a capital W, broad society. And so, it's like, what, even starting from education systems, or picking some sort of field of study and a vocation and a career. And in the past, it was very much like, I want to get here, so I will do step A, B, C, D to get there. And now the world that we're in is the completely different, and adaptability, not to the point of chaos, but being comfortable with the flow, the ebbs and flows of change, which to some people might feel like a side quest, but I think it's a reframing in the mind of, actually, there's going to be a lot more of these, maybe all the time, and to approach it instead of a deviation, but more with a childlike curiosity of like, oh, I'm on the path, but I'm going to go check out, I don't know, like this stone and see what's underneath it. And if it's a magical new fairyland that you've made up in your head and you decide to go there for a little bit, fine, right? And maybe you're not going to come back to that path you were walking on, or maybe it'll open. This is like a very extended metaphor now, but I'm like a portal to another part on that path. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how I am where I am right now in terms of, let's say, my career. Many people ask, like, how did you know to do what you did to get to where you are? Or particularly in public speaking, it's not really a linear thing. A lot of people who end up in a place, who have the opportunity to share stories on stage, it like wasn't something I set out to do, though I did enjoy sharing stories on stages when I was younger, but it wasn't something that 10 years later I thought would manifest into my life in this sort of way. I thought I would do some sort of theater or theater directing, and then completely was like in tech, and that was not even a thought. And it was the tech side journey that put me in all these rooms around the world, starting very small, explaining what at the time was a new technology, blockchains underpinning Bitcoin. It was such a weird thing to be going around to governments and companies and just educating, but using parable and story as a subtle way to critique the global financial system in my whimsical way. And somehow, here I am talking about adaptability and change and the future. Did I know this? As a futurist, you'd think I'd have the foresight in my own life. I have the powers for everyone else, but for myself, not so much. And it was more that what I thought was a side journey, what I thought was misaligned, that got me back to where I certainly was meant to be. And if it was any sooner, it wouldn't have worked, because I wouldn't have had the lessons or the self-awareness, or even I wouldn't say lack of ego, because we all have ego, and that would be quite egoic to be like, I don't experience this. But I definitely got to a point in my journey where I felt that my role here was to be of service, and wherever that service was needed is what I would do. And it's not so externally focused. And I think I would not be able to do what I'm doing now if that hadn't happened for me in my life and my journey. It would have, again, speaking of motivation or intention, would have been clouded by external perceptions. So again, I kind of just trust at this point and surrender to what is revealing itself, and staying present enough to be perceptive of it. And I'd say that to people. Anything I've ever learned about sales, which I think we all are selling in some aspects, because we're all exchanging information, conversation, energy, is presence, right? And heart or love, but that comes from presence. And that's the intentionality of, we tend to get very caught up, not to generalize for everyone, but speaking from my own experience, if you're so goal oriented, right? Because even in a sales interaction, can be very transactional. You're like, I want to get this person to hear and close. But if you're like, kind of forget about that for a second, and also just be fully present of what is this, what are their fears, their motivations, what are they actually telling you, and let go of that goal for a second. I think that presence is exactly the thing that forms the connection that furthers the process.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.